what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So in this video we are going to be continuing with a walkthrough of the FreeCodeCamp curriculum. Specifically for this video we are going to be looking at part 3 of the basic JavaScript curriculum from FreeCodeCamp. So let's get started. Alright, so in this video we want to return early pattern for functions. Alright, so sometimes when you write your functions, what happens is that where you have your return statement is where your functions stop executing. So for example, in this code we have two console logs, this console logging hello and this console logging bye bye. So this console log will be executed, but this one which comes after the return statement is not going to be executed. Okay, so for this challenge we will have to modify the A/B test function so that if A or B are less than 0, the function will immediately exist with a value of undefined. So we're going to use an if statement. So we say if A is less than 0 or if B is less than 0, then what we want to do is return undefined. So undefined, like so. Yeah, so what this means is that if A is less than 0 or if B is less than 0, this return statement here will not be executed because our function will just return undefined and that will be the end. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Alright, so now let's look at the counting card. So for this one, what we have here is that you have this function cc and it takes in a parameter card. Now card can be either a number, any of these numbers, or any of these strings we have here. So if it's any of these number, we increase count by 1. If it is 7, 8 or 9, we just add 0 or we add nothing. And if it's 10 or any of these strings, we decrease the value of count by 1. Okay, so I already have the solution here. I'm just going to reset the lesson and we are going to work through it together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check if card, which is the parameter, is greater than or equal to 2, and if card is less than or equal to 6. Alright, now if you're wondering why we are doing this, and that is because we are checking if card is any of these numbers, which is from 2 to 6. Okay, so if it is, then what we're going to do is you're going to increase count by 1. Now this is the same thing as writing count is equal to count plus 1. Okay, so that's the short form of it in JavaScript. Alright, so count plus equal 1. Else, if card is greater than 7 and card is also less than or equal to 9, which means if card is between 7 and 9, then what we're going to do is we're going to say count plus equals 0. So we are adding nothing, so we are adding 0. Else, that is in a situation where count is either 10 or any of these strings, what we're going to do is going to decrease, so minus count by 1. Okay, so now that we are done with that, what we want to do is we want to check the value of count. If count is greater than 0, it means count is positive. So if it's positive, we have to return the current count value and the string bet. Okay, so return count and then the string bet. Now there should be a space, so I'll bring space here before I write bet. Alright, else, which means if count is 0 or negative, we are going to return count plus space and then hold. So I'm going to clear this one from here, and that should solve it. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, why do I keep doing this? All right, now let's talk about JavaScript objects. So in JavaScript, objects are a way of structuring data such that we have what we call key value pairs. So these are pairs. So we have a key here. In this case, name is the key, and then the value is whiskers. Okay, so the values can be strings, numbers, or arrays, or even objects themselves. So we'll see more examples and you get to understand what objects are and how to use them. All right, so we are told to make an object that represents a dog called my dog. So to create an object, you write const or let or var my dog equal to, then you bring your curly braces, and then we want to give this my dog object some properties. Okay, so we're going to give it a name property, and the value of the name property is going to be a string. So let's just call it Scooby-Doo. And it also has to have a legs property. Let's give it 4 legs. And it's also going to have a tails property. We'll also give it just 1, a number. And then it's going to have a friends property as well, like so. Now note that after every key value pair, you have to bring your comma. That's very important. All right, let's make this a string, and let's say Fred. These are the friends of Scooby-Doo. Daphne, Velma, and then Shaggy. All right. Now, next up, assessing object properties with dot notation. So there are 2 ways you can assess properties of an object, either using the dot notation or the bracket notation. So first, let's look at the dot notation. So to assess, for example, this value, you first need to write the name of the object. So my obj dot the property, the name of the property that you want to assess. So my obj dot prop1. This will give you access to this value. Okay, so here for this challenge, you are to read in the property values of test obj using dot notation and set the height value, which we have here, equal to the object's height value. So the way you're going to do that is going to be, say, const height value is going to test obj dot height, like so. And the shed value is going to be test obj dot shed. Now let's console log one of them and see what we have. So for example, height value, and as you can see, we have bulk up, which is the value of height. Okay, all right. Oops, that's not what we wanted to do. All right. Now, like we said, we have 2 ways of assessing the object, either dot notation or bracket notation. So we've already looked at the dot notation. Let's now look at the bracket notation. So with the bracket notation, the way you use it is to just write the name of the object, like so, bring a bracket, and then the name of the property that you want to assess. And this is even useful for properties that have space between them. Okay, all right, so for example, my space name has space here, and let's see the challenge. So read the values of the properties an entree and the drink of test objects using the bracket notation and assign them to entree value and drink value. So here, const entree value is going to be test obj, bring your brackets, and let's write the name of the property, which in this case is an entree. Let's do the same for the drink property as well. say the drink. Again, let's console log 1 and see what we have. So we're going to console log entree value, for example. And as you can see, we have hamburger, which is the value for entree. All right, on to the next one. Why do I keep pressing reset? Okay, now we want to see how we can access object properties using variables. Okay, so for example, here we have a variable called my dog, and it has a value of hunter. So we say const my breed is equal to dogs. We bring our bracket notation, and then within the brackets we bring the variable name, which is my dog. Now remember, the value of this variable is hunter, so that gives us access to dogs and then the hunter property, which is Doberman. Okay, let's see the example. So for the example, we have a test obj which has numbers and the names of players. So what we want to do is set the player number variable to 16. So this 42, we want to set it to 16. And then using the player number variable, I'll just copy it. We want to access that number 16 inside the test obj property. So I'll paste it like so. Now let's console log player and see what we have. We should have Montana. Okay, so player. Yeah, and as you can see, we have Montana because this player number is a value of 16, and 16 here has a value of Montana. All right, on to the next one. Okay, now let's see how we can update object property, which is possible with JavaScript. So assuming you have our dog, which is an object, the name is Camper, and you want to change the name from Camper to Happy Camper, you can do that simply by saying our dog.name, which is the property, equal to the new value that you want to give it. Okay, so here let's see the example. You are supposed to update my dog object name property, and let's change her name from Coda to Happy Coda. So the way you're going to do that is to just say my dog, which is the name of the object, dot name, which is the property, equal to, now I want to change it to what? Happy Coda. All right. Okay, so that passes the test. Now let's look at how we can add new properties to a JavaScript object. Okay, so the way you do that is to just write the name of the object, and then you can either use the dot notation or the bracket notation. Either way will work. So using the dot notation, say dot the name of the new property you want to add equal to then the value of the property. Okay, so here we have my dog object. Want to add a back property to it and set it to a dog sound such as woof. So we can either use the dot or the bracket notation. So I'm just going to go for the bracket notation. So I'm going to say my dog, and we're going to say back, and then the value that we want to assign it is woof. Okay, so that's it. Okay, moving on, let's see how we can delete properties from a JavaScript object. Well, the way you do that is just use the delete keyword, write the name of the object, and then using the dot notation or bracket notation, use back, which is the name of the property. So now let's delete the tails property from my dog object. We can either use the dot notation or the bracket notation. So we'll say delete, which is the keyword we are using. My dog, let's use the dot notation this time around, dot tails. Okay, so let's do a console log of tails, sorry, my dog dot tails. Then I'm just going to copy and paste it here, and let's see what we have. So you see, before the delete, my dog.tails gives us a value of 1, which is this one here. But after we've deleted it, the console will give us undefined, which means it doesn't exist in the object any longer. All right. Next up, let's see how we can use object for lookup. So here we have an article object that has a title, link, author, language, and others. And we can access the article author, for example, by writing article using bracket notation, and then author. This will give us the name of the author here. Okay, so the challenge here is that you have a switch statement in this function called phonetic lookup, and we want to first change the switch statement into an object called lookup. Okay, so let's do that quickly. I'll just say let lookup equal to bring your curly braces, and you know objects are key value pairs, so this is going to be the key and these are going to be the values. So I'll just copy this. Okay, I'll hit option, press and hold option, or alt if you are on Windows, so that I can just copy it and won't have to waste time typing everything out. Okay, so I'll just copy this and copy the last one as well. Control C, and there you go. All right, now we have the keys. Let's add the values. So for alpha is Adams. Don't forget to bring your comma. For Bravo is Boston. For Charlie is Chicago. The value is Chicago. Delta, the value is going to be Denver, like so. And then for Echo, the value is going to be Easy. And then finally for Foxtrot, the value is going to be Frank. Okay, so now that we have our object set up, I am going to comment this out for now. Then what we are told is that we should use it to look up val and assign the associated string to result. So we have result declared here, which is an empty string, and this our function takes in a parameter called val. So want to say result is equal to lookup. Let's use the bracket notation, and then val. Now we are returning results. Okay, so for example, let's do a console log of this. Let's see what we will get. Okay, as you can see, we get Chicago, which is actually the value for Charlie. Okay, all right. So now I can just go ahead and clean this up. We no longer need it. Okay, now let's run the test, and we pass the test. Great, we are making progress. So let's continue. Now we want to learn how we can test objects for properties, or how we can check whether an object has a particular property. So what we use is a method called hasOwnProperty method. So we write the name of the object, you bring your dot, and then hasOwnProperty, which takes in the specific property that you want to check if the object has. Okay, so for example, here you can see that the object has a top property and a bottom property. So when you check whether it has a top property, it returns true. But when you check whether it has a middle property, it returns false because there is no middle property here. Okay, so now we have a check obj function and want to test if the obj, the object, this one right here, passed to the function has the property check prop. Okay, so we're going to say return, and we're going to say obj dot has own property, and then the name of the property we want to check, which in this case is check prop. So we don't need this, and that should be it. Okay, so we didn't pass the test. Okay, which means something is wrong. So let's see. So obj, which is the name of the object, dot has own property, and then check prop. Okay, so what could be the issue? Oh, okay. So we are told that we need to check if the property exists. We should return the value of that property. If not, we should return not found. Okay, so I'm going to rather cut this out and say if indeed the obj has this property, then what we are going to do is we want to return that property's value, as you can see. Okay, so we're going to say return obj dot check prop, else, that is if it is not there, what we want to return is a string not found. Okay, all right. Okay, let's see, let's try the bracket notation. All right, that works. So let's continue. All right, now let's see how we can manipulate complex objects. So here we have a more complex data structure. So it's a music, our music, which is an array. Inside it's an object with some key value pairs. You can see some of them are strings, some are numbers, some are arrays, some are booleans. Okay, so we have a similar thing also here, and what we want to do is we want to add a new album to the my music array, which is here. Want to add a new album. So that new album should have artist, title, release year, and a format. So we can say my music dot push, which is the method we use for adding items to an array. And then I'm going to say artist is going to be, let me just say Kojo Q. Don't forget to bring your comma. So title, what's the title of the album? The title is For My Brothers. Okay, now what else do we need to add? We need to add release year. So what year was the album released? This one was released in 2019, which is a number. And then what format? So I'll just say an array, and I'll say, let's say MP3, and let's add one more. Let's just say MP4. That should do it. All right, so now let's console log my music array. Let's see if we've added the new album. Yeah, and as you can see, we now have two objects. There's the second one we just added. Okay. All right, now let's see how we can access nested objects. Okay, so here we have an object which has this car key, and the value of the car key is an object itself. And inside here we have inside, which also is an object. We have outside, which also is an object. So your challenge for this lesson is to access my storage object, which we have here, and assign the content of the glove box. So as you can see, here is the glove box. The content is maps. We want to assign that content to the glove box content variable, which we have down here. Okay, so first we have to access my storage. Of course, that's the name of the parent or the object. And I'm going to say dot. Of course, you have to say car because we have to go inside the car object. Now, inside the car object, we have to go inside the inside property. So I'm going to say dot inside, and then within this, we also have to go into the glove box property. So we're going to say dot glove box. Okay, so this has a name with space, so we have to use the square notation and say glove space box like this. Okay, so now let's console log glove box component content. Let's see what we have. I'm going to copy this, paste it here. Okay, spelling mistake. Yeah, and as you can see, we have map. So we've been able to access the value of glove box, which is map in this case. All right, so we are making progress. Let's continue. Now let's learn how to access nested arrays. So nested arrays are just arrays within arrays. Okay, so for example, we have my plant, which contains objects, but within it we have arrays, as you can see. Okay, so your challenge is to use both the dot and bracket notation and set the variable second tree to the second item in the trees list from my plant. Okay, so first we need to go to my plant because that's the array. Okay, so that's the array, so my plant. Now inside my plant we have two items, the first and the second one, and you know that arrays are zero-based index. So plant, which is the second item, is going to be at index of 1. So we say index 1. Then want to get the list, access the list, so we say dot list. And then within the list, want to access the second item. Again, arrays are zero-based index. So there's the first item which has an index of 0, and there's the second item which has an index of 1. Okay, now let's do a console log of second tree. Let's see if we have pine. Yes, as you can see, we have pine. So that means what we've done is correct. Okay. Now let's look at this called the record collection. Okay. So here we have a record collection object which has these key value pairs. So it has this ID numbers, and then each ID has a value of an object, which is an album title, has an artist, and then tracks the same throughout. Now we have this update record here. It takes in 4 parameters: records, ID, prop, and value. So records is going to be an object containing several albums, like record collection here. And ID is going to be a number, an ID number like these ones. Prop is going to be a string, we are told, which will represent the name of the album property, and then value is going to be a string, which is going to be information we can use to update the album property. Okay, so first things first, let's see what we are supposed to do. We are to complete the function using the rules below to modify the objects passed to the function. So the first thing is that your function must always return the entire records object. So that is already taken care of here, so there's nothing to worry about. Next up, we are told that if value is an empty string, we want to delete the given prop property from the album. So let's do that. So we use an if statement. We'll say if value is equal to an empty string, then what do? We want to delete, so we use the delete keyword. We want to delete the prop property from the album. Now, how do we get a prop property? We have to remember these are key value pairs. The keys are the ID numbers. So we have to do records. Let's use the ID. And then we can use the bracket notation to get a prop. Okay, so this is going to delete this is going to be records. It's going to delete the the given prop property from the album. All right. Now, the next thing says that if prop isn't tracks, so say if prop, sorry, not props, prop isn't the string tracks, and what? And value isn't an empty string. So and value isn't an empty string. All right, then what do we want to do? If that is the case, then what we want to do is we want to assign the value to the album's prop. Okay, so again, records, we use the ID to access the album, and then prop to access the prop, and we want to assign to it the value we are receiving from here. Okay, now next up, we are told that if prop is tracks and value isn't an empty string, so let's write that condition. If prop is tracks and value isn't an empty string. Okay, if that is the case, what do we want to happen? Well, first we have to check if album does not have a tracks property. We should assign an empty array. So let's check if album does not have a tracks property. So we'll say records. Again, we want to access the album first because before we can check whether it has an album, whether it has that property, a tracks property or not. So has own property, remember, and we'll say prop. Now we are checking whether it doesn't have. This will check whether it has. So we want to check whether it doesn't have, so we need to negate it using the not symbol here. Okay, all right. Now once we've done that, we are told that first, if it doesn't have a tracks property, we need to give it. So again, let's use the ID to access it. We need to give it a tracks property, and the value of the tracks property we are told should be an empty array. So assign an empty array. All right, then once we've done that check, what we want to do is want to add value as the last item in the album's tracks. So again, we use the ID to access the album. We go to the tracks, and then we use the push method, which we use to add values to the end or as the last item of an array, and we save value. Okay, all right, and then when all is said and done, we are returning records. Okay, so that was a long one. Let's see if it passes the test. Yeah, it does. So I will encourage you, if all of that was a bit fast for you, I will encourage you to slow it down, maybe go back, rewind, and watch again and become familiar with it. All right, but if you're okay with that, then let's continue. All right, now let's look at something called loops. Okay, so in JavaScript or in programming, loops is just a technique we use to run a piece of code multiple times. We used to run it over and over and over again. Okay, so for example, we want to add the numbers 5 through 0 inclusive in descending order to my array using a while loop. Okay, so here we have an array, empty array. We let I equal to 0, and we are saying while I is less than 5, push the value of I into 0. And after every iteration, you do I plus plus, which just means that increase the value of I. So the first time the loop runs, the loop will push 1 into this array and then increase the value of I plus 1. So I will now be 2, and then we'll push 2. After that, I will be 3, you push 3, I will be 4, push 4, I will be 5, push 5. Now once I is 5, it means this condition here is no longer met. So the loop will cease running. Okay, so let's see how we can solve this. So we're going to say, first let I equal to 5. Okay, and we're going to say while I is greater than 0, okay, 1 to 5 to 0. Okay, while I is greater than or equal to 0, because we are told 5 through to 0 inclusive. So what we want to do is we want to push into the my array dot push the value of I. Now after every iteration of the loop, we want to decrease the value of I because we are doing descending order. Okay, now let's console log the value of my array and see what we have if we've done the right thing. Okay, there you have it, 5 4 3 2 1 0 inclusive. Okay, all right, now let's see how we can iterate with JavaScript for loop. So with for loop, the way it works is that you write it like search. So you write for, you bring a bracket and then a curly braces. Okay, now inside that bracket you initialize the loop. For example, you say let I equal to 0. So this is the value or where the loop will start running at 0, and then it will end when this is a condition. So when 5 is no longer less than 5, the loop will cease running. Now after every iteration or after every time the loop runs, we increase the value of I by 1, which is I plus plus. Okay, let's see the example. Use the for loop to push the values 1 through 5 onto the array. So the way we're going to do that is first write for, bring your brackets, and then bring your curly braces. Okay, so this is going to be where we say let I equal to 0, which is initialized now or starting our loop, and we need a condition. So we want to push the value from 1 through 5. So we say as long as I is less than or equal to 5, keep the loop running. Then we say after every iteration I plus plus. Now what do we want to do? We want to push the values. So we say my array dot push whatever the value of I is. Now let's do a console log of my array. Let's see what we have. All right, there you have it, 0 1 2 3 4 5. Oh wait, Okay, so we want to start from 1, not 0. So we just make this 1 instead of 0. All right. There you go. Okay, now iterate odd numbers with a for loop. So what we did earlier was to increase I by 1, but we don't always have to do I++ or I plus 1. You can also do I plus 2, okay, as you can see here, and that skips a value each time the loop runs. So we want to push the numbers from 1 to 9 to my array using a for loop. And we know these are odd numbers. So once again, let's write our for, bring your brackets, bring your curly braces. We'll say let I equal to 1 because we are starting from 1 to 9. And we want to run the loop as long as I is less than or equal to 9. That's where we are ending. And we'll say I plus 2. I plus equal 2 and not I plus plus because we want to be adding by 2 and get the odd numbers. Okay, so now my array dot push the value of I. Let's do a console log. Let's see what we are getting. My array. Yeah, as you can see, we get the odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Okay. All right. Now let's see how we can count backwards using a for loop, which is possible. All we have to do is instead of increasing the value of I, we can decrease the value of I. As you can see here, the value of I is being decreased by 2 each time the loop runs. Okay, so for this challenge, we want to push the odd numbers 9 through to 1 to my array using a for loop. So that's like the opposite of what we did earlier. So we say for loop, bring your brackets and bring your curly braces. Inside your bracket, you write I is equal to, this time around, I is going to be 9 because we are starting from 9 and then descended. So we want I to be, or want the loop to run as long as I is greater than or equal to 0. No, greater than 0 because we end at 1. And we say I minus equal to 2. Now this is the same as writing I is equal to I minus 2. Okay, but let's just keep it short and say I minus equals 2. All right, now we'll do my array dot push value of I. Okay, so let's do a console log of my array. Let's see what we are getting. All right, we have the odd numbers, but in descending order. So 9, 7, 5, 3, 1. Great. Okay, now let's see how we can also iterate through an array using the for loop. So for example, here you have an array of some numbers and you can iterate through them and log the values. Okay, so declare initialize a variable total to 0, and using a for loop, we are going to add the value of each element of my array to total. So let's just say total is equal to 0. So what we want to do is we want to add these numbers. So we take 2, add it to total. We take 3, add it to total. We take 4, add it to total. We take 5, add it to total. We take 6, add it to total. So how do you get these numbers one by one? We get them by using a for loop. So for, you bring your brackets and your curly braces. Let's say let I equal to 0. Now 0 because arrays are 0 based, and we say I is less than my array dot length. We want the loop to keep running as long as I is less than the length or the number of items in here. And we'll say I plus plus or I plus 1 after every iteration. So for every iteration, what we want to do is we want to do total plus equal to the value of I. So the value of my array I. Okay, so the first time you add the value of my array 0, because the first time the loop runs, I is equal to 0. So what is the value of my array 0? This is this one here. Remember, arrays are index based. And then we'll do I plus plus. The value of I will now be 1. We'll add this. I plus plus. The value of I will now be 2. It will add this. So we'll keep adding these values to total until, wait, my array is not defined. Oh, my R, it should be R. Until, let's see what we have for total now. As you can see, we have 20. So we've been adding all these numbers, and now the final value is 20. All right. Okay, we can also nest for loops. And the reason why we do that is because sometimes you end up having arrays within arrays. So as you can see, there's an array R, okay? And inside this array R, we have other arrays. Okay, so how do you access the elements of the arrays inside an array? One way of doing that is to use what we call nested loops. So which means you declare a for loop, and then inside that for loop you've declared, you have an inner for loop. Okay, let's see how that works. So we come here, we have let product equal 1. What we want to do is we want to multiply all so that it returns the product of all the numbers in the sub arrays. So for example, here we have an array. Inside that array we have arrays, sub arrays, and each of these sub arrays has 2 numbers. So we want to be multiplying all of these numbers. So let's use our for loop. Bring your curly braces. We're going to say let I equal to 0, because arrays are index based, 0 based index. Let I is less than R, which is the given array, dot length, and again I plus plus. Now we will have an inner for loop here, so we say for loop so that we can access the sub arrays within the bigger array. So we say let J. Now this can be anything, it's a variable, so it can be A, B, C, whatever you want to use, but usually people use I and J. So all right, J, as long as J is less than. Now we'll do my R I dot length. Okay, what this means is that we'll take Ri, for example, when R0, this 0 based index, so this is the first item. So we take this first item and then we check its length. Okay, so that's why I'm saying IR dot length. And then we say I plus plus. Bring your curly braces. All right, now what do we want to do? We want to multiply and get the product of all the numbers. So we have product here, which has a value of 1. So we say product times equals the value of Ri, and then using the square notation J. So this will give us the value of the array, of the inner arrays. Okay, type error, cannot read properties of undefined, reading length. Have I spelled length wrong, incorrectly? Let me just copy this. I don't know why. And let me just paste it here as well. Okay, why do I have this error? So type error, cannot read properties of undefined length. Okay, so r dot length, okay, I'm not sure what is happening. Okay, so let's try and figure this out. So we have let I equal to 0, I is less than r dot length I plus plus, and we say let j equal to 0, j is less than r I dot length. Oh, this should be j plus plus. Yeah, this should be j plus plus, not I plus plus. Yeah, so that should work now. Yeah, so I mean, these things happen. So when you are coding, you have to take your time and don't get discouraged when you face a roadblock like that. Okay, so let's move on. Now, iterate with JavaScript using the do while. So we've looked at the while loops, we've looked at the for loops. There's also another one called do while. Now, what this does is that it do something. Okay, so for example here, do. So push into this array the value of I, which is 0. Then I plus plus, increase I by 1. Whilst I is less than 5, continue it again. So the first time the code runs, it will do something. Whether the condition is met or not, it will do that thing. And then after doing that, it would go ahead and check the condition. If the condition is met, it will keep the loop running. If not, it will stop. Okay, so yeah, we have some examples. You can take your time and go through them. And what we have to do is change the while loop in the code to a do while loop. So the loop will push only the number 10 to my array, and I will be equal to 11 when your code has finished running. Okay, so what we can do is, let me come here, we say do. So what we want to do, we want to push into my array dot push the value of 10, which is the value of I anyway. And then after that, we want I to have a value of 11, so I plus plus. Now, want this code to run while. So want to give it a condition that will not be met. Okay, so we can say while I is less than 10. Yeah, that should work. So for now, let me comment this out and let's run the test. Okay, so that works. So let me explain what's happening here. So what is happening here is that first, the code does this. It pushes into my array the value of I, which is 10. And then it increases the value of I by 1. So I is now 11. So let's do a console log of I. You see that it is 11, as you can see. All right. Great. You've come so far. Let's continue. Okay, so now we want to see how we can replace loops with something called recursion. So recursion in JavaScript is just the way of a function calling itself, or a function performing the task it's supposed to do repeatedly over and over and over until a condition is met and then it stops. Okay, so for example here we have this function called multiply, and a recursion should have a base condition. So for example here the base condition is n should be less than or equal to 0. So whenever that base condition is met, return 1. And then else, if that base condition is not met, continue calling this multiply function, and anytime you call it, reduce the value of n. Okay, so the function will keep calling itself each time, reducing the value of n until you get to a point where n is no longer less than or equal to 0, and then the recursion will cease to run. Okay, so let's see the example we have here. So we want to write a recursive function sumRn that returns the sum of the first n elements of an array R. So this is an array R will be given. We want to return the first n elements. Okay, so what do we do? First, we need a base condition like I was saying. So if n is less than or equal to 0, then what we want to do is we want to return 0. That's our base condition. Else, So if n is not less than or equal to 0, let's keep the function running. So we say sum, which is the name of the function, r, which is the name of the array, and like I said earlier, we have to call the sum function again, but each time we have to reduce the value of n. Okay, let's add it to whatever we currently have, so n minus 1, like so. All right. Okay, on to the next one. Now we have profile lookup. So this is the challenge, and we have an array of objects representing different people in our contacts. So this contacts, we have an array of objects. Each object has a first name, last name, number, and then likes, which is an array itself. Okay, so we have a lookup profile function that takes name and prop. So where is it? As you can see, we have the lookup profile function. It takes in parameters name and then prop. Okay, now the function should check if name is an actual contact's first name and the given property prop is a property of that contact. So first things first, check if name is an actual contact's first name. Okay, so first, what you need to also understand is that we are going to loop through this array, because this array of contact contains 1, 2, 3, 4 items, and we want to check if each one of them, the first name is equal to the given name. So to do that, we have to loop through them, because we can't just check the first one and call it a day. We have to check the first one, the second one, third one, and fourth one. And the way we are going to do that is to use a loop, which we just learned about. So to use a loop, you say for, bring your bracket and the curly braces. So inside the curly braces, we say let I equal to 0. We say as long as I is less than. Now we say contact, because that's the array we want to loop through. So let's check for the length of contact, and as long as I is less than the length of contact, let's keep the loop running. Then after each iteration, I++, let's increase the value of I by 1. Okay, now the first thing we want to check is if name is an actual contact's first name. So we say if name, which is the given argument, is equal to contact. Now remember, we are looping through the contact array. So contact dot first name. So we want to check if contact dot first name. Okay, so that's the first condition. Now let's bring our curly braces. So we want to check if name is an actual contact's first name, and the given property prop is a property of that contact. Okay, so we also want to check if, how do you check if an object has a property? So first, let's assess that object. Again, contact with an S. So remember, dot has own property. Okay, and what property are we checking? Prop, which is given us as an argument here. Okay, now what we want to say is that if name is an actual contact first name and the given property is a property of that contact. So if both are true, so we have two if statements here. If both if statements are true, then we want to return the value of that property. Okay, so we'll say return contact for us to get that object or particular contact. Then let's use the bracket notation to get a prop. So this will give us the value of that property. Okay. Now, if name does not correspond to any contact, then return no such contact. Okay, so that means after our loop has run, if we don't get any name that is similar to the given name, we want to return the string no such contact. Okay. If prop does not correspond to any valid properties of a contact found to match name. Okay, so in this case, we found the contact which matched named. So whilst within the for loop, we found a contact which matched named. But that contact, so it should be within the first if. So if name is equal to contact dot first name. So we found the contact that has the first name, but it didn't have the property. Okay, so it should be outside this if statement, but within this if statement. All right. Then what do? We want to return the string no such property. All right. Whew, that was a long one. Okay, so you passed the test. So once again, if anything was unclear, I would highly encourage that you rewind and take your time to go through it and try and understand it. All right, but if you get it, let's move on. All right, now we want to look at how to generate random fractions with JavaScript. So JavaScript has a method called math.random that we can use for that purpose. So change the random fraction, this fraction for function here, to return a random number instead of 0. Okay, so instead of 0, want to use the math.random function of JavaScript to return a random number. All right, now let's just do something. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so this math.random here will give us, actually let me console log it out and see what it will give us. As you can see, it gives us a fraction, a very long fraction. But what if we wanted a random whole number and not a fraction, a random fraction? So the way we do that is to use something called math.floor. Okay, and then after using math.floor, we multiply it by a certain number. So that will give us the whole number. So for example, if we want a random number between 1 or from 0 and 19, we'll do math.floor and multiply it by 20. Because that will give us a random number of anywhere from 0 to 19, but not 20 itself. Okay, so you are calling, so use this technique to generate and return a random whole number in the range of 0 and 9. So we say math.random, but let's say times 10, because this will give us random numbers from 1 to 9, but not 10 itself. And let's round them up. So we say math.floor. So math.floor just does the rounding. It rounds the decimal up. Okay. All right, now let's generate random whole numbers within a range. Okay, so we have a range here, minimum and maximum. And to generate a random whole number within a range, this is the formula. We multiply math.random by the result we get here, which is max minus min plus 1. And then when all is said and done, we add it to min. So let's see an example in progress. So we want to create a function random range that takes my min and my max and returns a random whole number that's greater than or equal to my min and less than or equal to my max. So we say, let's use the formula math.floor, math.random to get the random number. Let's multiply it by the result of my max, capital M, my max, minus my min plus 1. And then we'll add plus 1 to we'll add it to my min. Okay, now I can give this a variable, let's say random nums equal to, then I'll just return random nums. All right, on to the next one. So we have a function in JavaScript called parseInt that we can use to convert strings into an integer. So for example, we have the string 007. With parseInt, we can use it to convert the string to the integer 7. Okay. Now, if the first character in string cannot be converted into a number, JavaScript will return none, which is not a number. So use parseInt in the convert to integer function which we have here, so that it converts the input str into an integer. So let's just say parseInt str. Okay, so let's return it. So let's return parseInt str. All right. Now convert to integer. Let's look at something called Radix. So you know numbers, we have the normal number system we use is base 10, but we also have other number systems like binary, which is base 2, for example. And when we want to do the conversion or use the parseInt to convert to base 2, for example, you can use the Radix or give it the second argument to the parseInt. Okay, so here we have parseInt, we are giving it a string and then a Radix. So for example, if we give parseInt 11 and 2, it will change this number into it will change it from base 2 to the binary. So for example, let's see, use parseInt to convert in the convert to integer function. So it converts a binary number to an integer and returns it. So the binary number we have here is 1001. So we'll say const num is equal to parseInt. So the first argument is going to be the number 0011. Now the Radix is going to tell JavaScript that this value that we are giving it is in base 2. So do the calculation accordingly. All right, now let's return num after all is said and done. Okay. All right, so something is not working here. So use parseInt in the convert to integer function so that it converts a binary number to an integer and returns it. Okay, so why is it not working? Okay, you know what, let me just do this. Okay, let's see, let's do a console log. Let's see what we are getting. Okay, we are getting 19. And for this one, we should get 57, but we are not getting 57. Okay, why so? We're also getting 19. Oh, okay. So instead of using the argument from the variable, I'm using 111. So it should be str, like so. All right, see, you get 57. Now this should pass. Yeah. Okay. All right, so next up, let's learn about the conditional or ternary operator. So the conditional operator, also called the ternary operator, can be used as a one-line if-else expression. Okay, so here, for example, we have an if statement, and we do something here, and then we have an else. So it's an if-else statement. Now, if you don't want to use this if-else statement, we can use something we call the conditional or ternary operator. And the way it works is you first give the condition, then the code to run when the condition is true or is met, and the condition to run when the then it's false. So the way you can remember this is WTF, okay? So what is the condition? And then true, what should it run when the condition is true? And then what should it run when the condition is false? So what to run when it's true, what to run when it's false, okay? Just keep that in mind and you will be fine. All right, now use the conditional operator in the check equal function to check if two numbers are equal or not. So we have two numbers, A and B, and want to check if they are equal or not. So we'll just say if. So what's the condition? The condition is A is equal to B. That's the condition. Now, if this condition is met, what do we want to do? We want to we don't need the if statement. I don't know why I wrote the if statement. So we check the condition. If the condition is met, we want to return the string equal. If it is not met, we want to return the string not equal. All right. Now, let's see how we can use multiple conditional or multiple ternary operators. Okay, so just the same way you can have multiple if else statements, you can also have multiple ternary operators, and that's how you use them. So you write the first line and what should be run when it is true, and then what should be run when it is false. Okay, so let's see. In the check sign function, use multiple conditional operators following the recommended format used in find greater or equal. So the recommended format here, I will explain what that means. To check if a number is positive or 0, and the function should return positive, negative, or 0. All right, so first let's check if, so return num, if num is equal to 0, okay? So if num is equal to 0, what do you want to return? You want to return the string 0. Okay. Now what if num is not equal to 0? Then if num is not equal to 0, we want to still check if num is greater than 0. Okay. Now if num is greater than 0, what do you want to do? What you want to do is that you want to return the string positive because the number is greater than 0. Else, if the number is not greater than 0, you want to return the string negative, like so. Okay. All right, now let's see how we can use recursion. Let's get back to recursion. Let's see how we can use it to replace a for loop, or we can use it to create a countdown. So yeah, I will encourage you to read this note, but let's head straight into the challenge. So we have defined a function called countdown here with only one parameter n, and the function should use recursion to return an array containing the integers n through to 1 based on the given n parameter. Okay, so if the function is called with a number that is less than n, the function should return an empty array. So that would be the base condition. We would have a look at it, don't worry. For example, calling this function with n equal to 5 should return the array 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's get started. So we'll say if for our base condition n is less than 1, now I will highly encourage that you read this article. I will leave a link in the description below, okay, on FreeCodeCamp. There's an article I wrote for the FreeCodeCamp, and it explains what recursion is, the 3 parts of a recursive function. It goes a bit into details. It's not a very long article, it's short, okay? You can read it in probably 5 to 10 minutes, and get a really good understanding of recursion. So I highly encourage it. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Okay, now if length is less than 1, want to return 1. So we want to return an empty array as we're told. Here, if the function is called with a number less than 1, the function should return an empty array. Okay, so that's what we are doing here. All right. Else, that is if it's not called with a number less than 1, what we want to do is let's create a constant. Let's call it final array, and that is going to be countdown. Let's call the function itself, but this time with a number that is 1 less than n, so n minus 1. Now keep in mind that we want it to be in descending order, so instead of doing final array dot push, we want to do, okay, let me show you what will happen if we do final array dot push. Return final array. We don't need this return statement. Okay, so let's just call this countdown function. I just want to demonstrate what will happen. So let's call it, for example, with the number 5. Okay, and you see what happens. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that's not what we want. We want 5, 4, 3, like in descending order. So instead of doing array dot push, we'll do array dot unshift. Okay, and that will give us 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is exactly what we want. So let me remove this, and that should be it. Okay, so now let's look at how to use recursion to create a range of numbers. Okay, so we have defined a range of numbers function with 2 parameters, which is start num and end num, and we want to create a set that the starting number will always be less than, or the starting number that will be given will always be less than or equal to the ending number. Your function must use recursion by calling itself and not use loops of any kind. It should also work for cases where both start num and end num are the same. Okay, so let's. Alright, so first what we want to do is check if we have a case where start num is equal to end num. Then what we're going to do is we're going to just return an array with one of them. So let's just say start num. Okay. Else, if that's not the case, so this is going to be our base. Once again, I highly encourage that you read this article to really get a good grasp of recursion. All right, let's create a final array, and let's call the function range of numbers, and we are going to call it with start num, okay, as the first parameter. We're also going to call it with end num, but of course it has to be end num minus 1, okay, and then want to push into final array the value of end num. And when all is said and done, let's return the final array. All right, we no longer need this return statement. Okay, that settles it. Okay, again, if you were a bit lost, I would say go back and watch or read this article. I highly encourage it. All right, so that was the last challenge for the FreeCodeCamp basic JavaScript. Yeah, use recursion to create a range of numbers. So I've done videos for all of this. I will leave a link to them in the description below as well. Do well to check it out. And thanks a lot for sticking around. If you enjoyed this video, do well to share or subscribe to the channel. I'll be posting videos in future for all of these ESs and all of these as well, regular expression, debugging, and all of that. All right, so this was a very long one, and happy coding and have a great day. Bye bye.